All right, let's dive into James Clear's Atomic Habits. It's one of those books that's all about a simple idea: how making tiny, almost invisible changes can lead to some truly remarkable results. Let's get right into it. So, let me ask you a question. Why do most new habits fail? I mean, we've all been there, right? New Year's resolutions, a sudden burst of motivation, you're going to run a marathon, you're going to learn Spanish. But a few weeks in, that fire just fizzles out. What is going on? Why is it so incredibly hard to make these good habits stick? Well, James Clear argues that the real problem is how we think about change. We are obsessed with the idea of a massive breakthrough, that one big earth-shattering moment that's going to fix everything. But the truth is, real lasting change almost never works that way. And that gets us to the very first big idea from the book, what he calls the myth of breakthroughs. We just love to look at successful people and imagine their success came from one single, defining moment. But that overnight success story, it's usually just the tip of the iceberg. What we don't see are the hundreds, maybe thousands, of small, consistent efforts happening day after day just below the surface. We get so fixated on the final result that we completely ignore the slow, steady climb it took to get there. And then we wonder why we give up. So if we toss out this myth of the big breakthrough, what are we left with? Well, this is the absolute heart of the book, the incredible power of compounding. I want you to think of your habits just like you'd think about financial investments. Small, consistent deposits of effort don't just add up. They grow exponentially over time. They multiply. And that's exactly where the word atomic comes from. We're talking about an extremely small change that's also the fundamental unit of a much larger system. Now here's the wild part. Getting just 1% better each day doesn't sound like much at all, does it? But over a year, the long-term gains they're absolutely astronomical. Okay, now this visual right here is so important because it explains why so many people quit. We expect our progress to be a straight line, just steadily going up. But in reality, the biggest, most powerful results are delayed. So for a while, it feels like you're putting in all this work and getting absolutely nothing back. It's super frustrating. And that gap, that's what Clear calls the valley of disappointment. This quote from Jacob Riis just perfectly captures the mindset we need. Just imagine a stonecutter hitting a rock, maybe 100 times, and nothing happens, not a single crack. Then, on the very next hit, the whole thing splits in two. Now, was it that one last blow that did it? Of course not. It was the accumulation of all the hits that came before it. That's what mastery looks like. It's patience, it's persistence. Okay, so the theory is solid. It makes a ton of sense. But how do we actually do this? How do we put it into practice? Well, the book lays out a surprisingly simple but incredibly powerful framework for actually building these habits. And here it is. The 4 laws of behavior change. This is your toolkit. For a good habit, you want to make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. And if you want to break a bad habit, you just do the opposite. You make it invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying. It's basically a user manual for your own brain. We could spend hours on every single one of these laws, but for now, let's just do a deep dive on the first and maybe the most fundamental one. Make it obvious. You're going to be amazed at how much this one single principle can change things for you. The huge idea here is that your environment is your destiny. I know that sounds dramatic, but it's the subtle, often invisible force that shapes your daily behavior way more than willpower or motivation ever could. Seriously, think about it. We're so much more a product of our surroundings than we even realize. If you really want to change your habits, don't just try to change your mind. Change the room you're in. Redesign your entire environment to make the good habits the easy, obvious default choice. So the book gives this fantastic real-world example. Researchers at a hospital in Boston wanted to nudge their staff and visitors towards better drinking habits. But here's the thing. They didn't put up posters, they didn't give lectures, they didn't rely on anyone's willpower. All they did was change the environment. They didn't even get rid of the sugary sodas. They just added bottled water to every single drink station in the room, making it the most obvious and accessible choice. The soda was still there, but suddenly water was everywhere you looked. And the results? They were stunning. Without a single memo or announcement, water sales jumped by almost 26% in just a few months. That's the unbelievable power of just making the right choice, the most obvious one. And this really brings us to a huge takeaway from the book. Stop focusing so much on your goals. Start building systems. I mean, think about it. Winners and losers often have the exact same goals. The real difference is the system of tiny, consistent habits they build to get there. It's like Clear says, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So that leaves us with one final question to think about. For you, if you want to eat healthier, could you put a bowl of fresh fruit on your kitchen counter instead of a cookie jar? If you want to read more before bed, what if you put a book on your pillow every morning? Just think, what is one tiny atomic change you can make in your environment, maybe even today, that could set off a remarkable chain reaction for you?